In 2014, a therapist diagnosed me with genetic depression, anxiety disorder, ADHD, and insomnia. My whole life, I had the symptoms of these illnesses but never labeled them. I could never relax easily, I had a hard time letting go of negative thoughts, I would worry more than my peers, and I always had a hard time sleeping. At first, I just thought something was wrong with me. I thought I was a pessimist or I had a bad attitude or something. I tried several different techniques to help my situation: therapy, meditating, reading, even hypnosis. They helped my issues a lot, but did not clear them up completely. Then I found out these conditions are actually linked to the chemistry of my brain. It's nature, not just nurture, that caused them. These conditions are actually linked to several of my family members, not just me. I didn't truly understand this until talking to my mother. When I was 19, she told me that when she was in her adolescence, she would not be able to sleep, and she would write in a journal at night when she couldn't sleep. I thought that was really weird because I did the exact same thing when I was in my adolescence. Then, when I was 24, we had another conversation. She said that even though she had multiple siblings, she would still feel lonely inside and doubt her self-worth constantly, which is weird because I felt the exact same way my whole life. Having those two conversations and seeing how many habits I have in common with my mother is what made me realize my symptoms have a genetic component to them. To a certain extent, these conditions were out of my control and were not by choice. I do agree that mindsets are learned and can be changed. That's the nurture side of the argument. But from those insights, I learned mindset is also affected by genetics and chemistry of the brain. That is the nature side of the argument. For so long, I thought my insomnia, anxiety, and depression was all my fault. I thought it was because I had a bad mindset. But when I had those conversations and insights about my mother, I realized a large part of it was out of my control because it was linked to the chemistry of my brain. I realized this because my mother and I grew up completely different. She was born and raised in Laos until the age of 13. She lived her adolescence in poverty, sleeping in graveyards, and barely having anything to eat on a daily basis. Then she moved to the United States, where she lived in poverty again, and worked her way up the corporate ladder. She also has 3 sisters, 2 brothers, was raised under different cultural values, and was raised under the cultural values of a woman. Myself, on the other hand, was born and raised in America. I was fortunate enough never to live in poverty, was immersed in American culture, only had one older brother, and was raised in the cultural values of a man. Yet, we still had the exact same problems when it came to our mind. We both struggled with insomnia, both had a hard time shutting our brains off, both had anxiety, and both doubted our self-worth constantly. It was at that point when my mother told me the second story about herself, I realized these conditions were not by choice. I was born with these conditions. That released a lot of pressure off my shoulders. For so long, I thought I was weak-minded or crazy. But then I realized the problems in my head were linked to the chemistry of my brain and my genetics. That completely shifted my mindset on my mental illness. That is why I made this video. I did not make it for sympathy, for pity, or for views. I made this video to spread awareness of how mental illness really works. It's not always our choice to be affected by mental illness. To a certain extent, it is out of our control. Just think if society viewed mental illness like a physical illness, how different the views would be on them. For example, if you see someone in a cast for their leg, you obviously see that that person has certain circumstances that does not allow them to live a normal life. It is the same for mental illness. A person with mental illness has certain circumstances in their brain that prevent them from living a normal life. Whether that be letting go of thoughts, being anxious, being more susceptible to depression, or not being able to sleep. The problem is that when a person has mental illness, it cannot be seen. They look completely normal. The reason I made this video is to spread awareness and acceptance for mental illness. Please remember, it's not always the person's fault they suffer from mental illness, and remember, the mental illness also cannot be seen. People with mental illness look completely normal. Also, I want to say to the people with mental illness, it's completely normal and okay for you to have a mental illness. Do not look at it as a handicap or a burden. Just look at it as certain circumstances in your life. circumstances that we have methods and medicines to combat. We do not have to interpret those circumstances as negative. We can find a light in those circumstances and find positivity. Also, I want to say to those people who have mental illness, you are not alone, and it's completely okay to have mental illness. It does not make you broke, weak, or less than. It just means you're a human, as we all are. We all have our flaws. Everyone's going through their own personal battles, internal and external.